Philip, I know usually we start with a topic and you elaborate and I ask questions, but I thought maybe what if we do an interview of what it's like to be a founder? Uh,
Sounds good.
Founder is a term I think is more recent, not when you started 26 years ago, but I think that it's accurate and usually it has something to do with Silicon Valley and the tech field, or that's where it's most popular, at least as I understand it.
I,
But
let me.
you've
I'll
go
just
ahead.
comment here. I never ever 20 some years ago when I never thought of myself as a as a founder. Now
No, I would agree.
I did flounder a lot, but I never thought myself as a founder. So you're right.
I understand that. I understand that. Uh, I think also it wasn't a term that was in the in the atmosphere of the verbal atmosphere of business, at least as I remember it, that long ago. And I think we look at founders now as especially again if it's tech, then it was it's Microsoft, it's Google, the founders type of thing. It doesn't mean others can't be founders that aren't household names, uh, but we also associate them with like great riches and fame and so on. But at the same time, we don't talk about the risk. We don't talk about the sleepless nights that leadership and we had an episode where you talked about you weren't sure you're going to make payroll,
Sure.
and the only person who was losing sleep over that was you as the founder.
Yep.
What would you say as far as what do people not see as founders? The yes, we know it's 80-hour weeks. Yes, we know you're worried about big things or little things that others maybe aren't as concerned about or only concerned about during working hours. Are there things that you look back now and go, I spent a lot of time worrying about or stressed about X or Y that maybe we wouldn't have seen if we were at Logic Force with you at the times.
Sure. I think the biggest thing is security.
Mm,
I worked after I got out of grad school. I worked for 5 years as a W-2 employee, and I never in in those 5 years, I never even thought about not getting a paycheck. Never even occurred to
of
me.
course,
You
of
sign a
course,
contract, or an employment agreement or whatever it is, and they hire you, and it's understood as long as you come to work, you're going to get paid. And that there's a lot of I didn't realize it, but there's a ton of security in that. Even though it, depending on the company, it may not be that secure, but the employee doesn't feel that. And so as a founder, as the business owner, the one that has to sign the payroll checks, every payroll, even, in the early years was, I'm not sure I'm going to get paid. And
okay,
so that security of knowing that because founders have mortgages, they have expenses, utility bills, etc. And so I had to know, am I going to have money to pay my bills? And you didn't always 100% know that. And that is a big factor. Not everybody can do this because not everybody can accept that kind of risk. It's a special type of personality, I guess, that can launch out and risk that kind of insecurity, I guess you would say.
right,
I think that was the biggest thing, insecurity, not just for weekly payroll, monthly, whatever it was, but also my future.
yes,
My future savings and everything was wrapped up in the business. The business succeeded and grew, then my future looked okay. But if the business faltered, I had no backup. I had no backup plan. And so that's risky. I'll
right,
admit that is very, very risky. And but the rewards, on the other hand, are
yeah,
more than getting whatever that agreed payroll check was for every 2 weeks.
right, Right. Yeah. They're big rewards, big risk.
Yeah.
You just mentioned special characteristics of an entrepreneur, founder, so on, and the biggest one being taking risk. Were there any other characteristics that you noticed about yourself or about other founders that you spent time with, talked to, that you were like, oh, that's part of what makes a founder a founder? Anything that comes to mind?
I think out of the box thinking.
Okay.
Because if you're starting a business, that means I've got an idea about doing something that I think we can do better, or I think we can do more economical, or I think we can be more relevant. It's not being done to the extent that I think I can do it. And it's because out of the box thinking. And as you get into the business, and we've talked about as the business goes through different seasons, you've constantly got to evolve your thinking about how can I do this perhaps differently. You reach a certain level of plateau. We've talked about that in previous episodes. And you've got to think, I can't keep doing what I'm doing. I've got to think differently. And that out of the box thinking, I think, is a critical characteristic for successful founders who go on and to grow good companies.
How do you know you've got it or you don't have the out of the box thinking?
That's a good question. I don't know how I'd answer that.
I mean, in a way, you have out of the box thinking. You can also have out of the box thinking to a certain level. Like if you use the sports analogy, I'll use a sports analogy. You know, there's the high school, then there's college, then there's pros, and then maybe you're doing the Olympic team or the national team, whatever the sport is.
Hmm.
And that theoretically, some people keep growing and have that, and then some people are like the greatest, and no disrespect, high school basketball coach in the history of a state.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But somehow they did, or the defensive coordinator who is the great defensive coordinator and never could make the leap to being a coach in a football.
Hmm.
Is there any business equivalent there, or is that one of those intangibles that you don't really know you have until you throw yourself off the cliff with your business?
There's a little bit of intangibility about it. Um, I think being able to think through solutions to problems in a way that is not obvious, and maybe that
Okay.
reveals itself projects in school. I know I thrived on really um, difficult assignments. I
Okay.
just an example that came to mind when I was in differential equations. I was a computer science math double major, and famously, our professor in DE differential equations gave it was a small class gave us a take home test, personalized take home test. Every
Oh wow.
every student got their own custom test with however
Wow.
many problems, and you had a week or whatever to work them. And man, I spent hours on that, but I did it, and I thrived on it because it was difficult, and I had to think. And when I turned it in, my professor said, "I've never I gave you a problem I've never had a student solve before, and you solved it."
Really?
And now I went to a small
Yeah.
liberal arts school, so it's not like Harvard
Yeah.
or anything
Right.
like that. But still,
Right.
being thriving in situations that seem impossible and finding a way through that. And
Mm-hmm.
it could be in school, it could be in relationships, it could be in personal finance, any number of ways. But if you thrive on being able to squeeze through tight places and coming through on the other side, then I would say that's a good indicator you've got that mindset out of the box thinking. And
Got it.
I saw this employees. I had tremendous employees, and we would sit down to brainstorm about a particular issue a client was having. And we put all of the situation, all of the elements on the table, and I would watch them as they would just like try to approach it from a straightforward standpoint, like I approach every other problem, and they get stuck and they couldn't go anywhere.
Okay.
They were great employees, but they didn't have that, okay, let's think another way. And I think you either have it or you don't.
it seems like you're saying it will be seen in other areas too. It's not necessarily your area of specialty. It's not necessarily for you computers, IT, DE, as you just said. You might see it as a chef. You might see it again at home while you're just cooking or whatever the case might be. It applies across. You'll see signs of it other places.
I think it is a personal characteristic, yes, that you will see in different elements of your life. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's somewhere you go, you drive to work or you drive your kids to school or you drive to church or whatever, and do you always take the same route? Most
Oh.
people probably do. It's just what I'm going to do. I don't. I like to change it up.
Okay.
I
Okay.
don't know why, but that's just me. I get bored driving the same route every day. So I'll change it sometimes. And sometimes I won't decide till I get to the light and I either go left or right. And oh, today I'm going left. It's just spur of the moment. I don't know. Maybe that's
Okay.
weird, but that's just how I am. And I think that sort of on the spot thinking helped me accept the risk of starting a business and growing the business because I didn't shrink from that risk. I felt it, but I didn't shrink from it. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go this way today.
All right. I think that's a great example. That's a great example. I usually don't have enough time to decide on my route. I just, oh no, I got 5 minutes.
Well,
I
there's
gotta get
that. Yeah,
there.
that is very
The-
true. Yes.
One of the things we wanted to talk about is what did you love doing the most as a founder slash business owner, and what did you dislike the most?
The thing I love doing the most, other than making money,
Sure.
um, I loved the nitty-gritty of getting into a project. I loved big projects
Okay.
that were thorny, that were had a lot of moving parts, and it required a lot of strategy and getting in there and making that work. I had an example of this. We would do trials, legal trials, where we were essentially producing the trial as far as all of the exhibits that we be presented, whether it be documents that have been scanned or video elements or whatnot. And so one day we were planning for this trial, and it's it's helter skelter, particularly the week before the trial. There's everything coming at you from the attorneys, things coming from the other side. And so I'm in there just trying to orchestrate, and I've got this guy doing this, and I'm in my mind, I'm orchestrating the whole thing, how it's going to happen, how it's going to be rolled out. And I had a friend of mine that happened to come by the office, and he told me, he goes, dude, he goes, you are in your element. I just stood back and watched you. You had all these things going on. It looked like chaos, but you were managing it. And
Okay.
I love that. So
Yeah.
that just bringing together resources to solve big problems, I thrive on that. And I love doing that in business. What I hated, especially toward the end, as my business had matured and I'm getting older, when I'm younger, it didn't bother me so much, but as I'm getting older, everything that I had was tied up in the business. And so in those last few years, I would go to bed at night thinking I am one phone call away from, say, a big client that says, you know what, you messed up, we're firing you, from losing everything. And I hated that. I hate it because I didn't have the resources to have other investments to sort of, ideally, if you're a good manager of money, you've got a diversification of resources. But so many
Right.
time business owners that don't have a lot of means, which I was one of those, you can't afford to diversify. You put everything into that. So it's one bet. If you miss it, it's bad. If you make it, it's really good. But if
Right.
you miss it, it's bad. I hated that. I hated that all or nothing kind of concept, especially at the end. And that sort of accelerated me toward a position to sell the company because I wanted to cash in. I built this over
Oh,
26 years.
right.
Or at the time we were talking about selling was a few years before that, and I knew I'd built something that was of value, but that
Yeah.
value was not permanent. It could be temporal if I had an employee screw up or something, and
Yes.
so I wanted to I wanted to take some chips off of the table at that point in time. I'm
Okay.
getting up near 50 years old, and I got to have something for all this work. So
Right.
I'm not saying I
Right.
didn't have some
So,
savings, but
no,
I
of
did.
course.
But you get the
Right.
idea.
Right. But yeah, you didn't have a solid fallback.
Mhm. The other thing that I hated, and particularly in my business, is dealing with unreasonable clients. I'll deal with it and I'll be kind, but people that are not logical frustrate me to no end. And so I got a
Yeah.
call. Here's an example from an attorney, and it was an attorney that was not a big client. In fact, I think they were a solo practitioner, or maybe there's only 3 attorneys. But we didn't do a lot of work for them. But they had called, "Hey, we want some new computers." So I sent some guys over there. They put in new computers. So this attorney calls me up. First thing I answered the phone was she had called the reception and wanted to talk to the owner, me. And the first thing out of her mouth, "I'm going to sue you for everything you're worth." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, what
Oh,
is this?" And she
right.
was just going off on the phone. I'm like, "Please tell me what's going on." "Well, your guys installed a computer and I now have a virus on my computer. I am suing you for everything you've got."
Okay.
I don't know how to answer that.
Right.
I
Right.
do not know how to answer that because it was an illogical argument. And so I offered to come and get the computer and take it. But
Right. Right. Of course.
we didn't do any more work for her. She didn't sue. It was a ploy, and people do that
Uh huh.
like that. I just don't like that. I don't like people that play games like that. And I dealt with
Right.
that fairly frequently. And I had some great clients, but then I had some clients that were just completely unreasonable, and I just don't like dealing with unreasonable people. Sorry.
Of course. And that's part and parcel
Yep.
of the whole thing.
Yep. It sure
Yeah.
is. That
Yeah.
I dislike that. But it was yeah, it's part of it's part of running a business and dealing with people. Same thing,
Okay.
I'm sure, for
Yeah.
pastors, for teachers,
That's yes.
parents.
Right.
Everybody
Right.
experiences it.
Right.
That's just I don't like it.
Yeah. It's right. Long list. There's a long list of people who don't like those kind of things.
Exactly.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's always a different type of person depending on what type of person you are. So yeah, things that don't aggravate other people drive you up the wall without even realizing it. My favorite question is always, what do you wish you knew at the beginning that you know now? What would you share with new entrepreneurs if you have a couple of succinct insights that you
Mhm.
said, oh, if only I'd have known that 26 years before I sold my business?
Yep. That's an easy one. I wish I'd started out on day 1 building my business in with the intent of selling it.
Oh, explain.
I had no concept of selling the business. When I started the business, I'm just trying to make enough money to pay my mortgage.
Yeah,
And
of
even for
course.
years later, I'm just building the business to generate income, not only for me, for my employees, invest in the business back for them. And I guess it's part of being young. You just think I'll do this forever. And then you get to a certain age, and you're like, I'm not going to be doing this forever. So I had to start thinking about what is my exit strategy? And that's the term. I wish someone had explained to me what an exit strategy was at the very beginning. I didn't even consider it till years down the road. And as such, some of the things that I had done to build my business was not conducive to a good exit strategy.
Ah,
Had I known that at the beginning, I could have done things differently to uh, to make to make my exit happen quicker and bigger. Absolutely could have.
okay.
Just one example. I mentioned these projects that I would do, and projects were a great source of income for us. When I say project, is say we're going to install a complete new network, a complete new server, new switches, new everything. That's a big deal. We got the hardware, we've got all
Sure.
the labor, we've got the software installation, the setup, the training. It's a big thing and it's a big number. And so I do, 3 or 4 of those in a year, and my revenue is wow. But when you go to exit the business, somebody looking to buy the business, like they discount that number. What? Because it's not recurring. In my type of business,
Of
in IT services business, purchaser what they're purchasing is recurring revenue that I can depend on every year.
course.
And maybe I'll talk about that facet. I think that warrants a podcast episode in itself of how I transition from sort of these one-off projects in and turn that into recurring revenue
Recurring
that was on
revenue.
multi-year contracts, which was very attractive to people looking to buy the business. I wish I'd known that from day one. I wish somebody just sat down and explained, Philip, you're going to want to sell this business someday, and here's what you need to do to start preparing day one.
Got it. Got it. And would you have been able to sell 3 years earlier, 5 years earlier,
10,
with
10
really,
years earlier.
and theoretically for more money?
Yes. Feel
Oh
confident.
wow.
I feel confident. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Because I'd have more
Okay.
time to build, to build that
Toward your goal.
portfolio of
Yeah.
recurring pay. I still did projects. That was still a part of our revenue, and that was valuable, and that was good. But the bulk of my business was recurring revenue contracts that we had when the company that bought
Yeah.
my business, they bought a book of business that was going to occur year after year after year as long as
Right.
they
3 to 5
continued.
year contracts,
Yep,
whatever.
yep.
Of course. So the one offs looked good, but had no value to a
Very little value.
purchaser.
I mean, there was some value, but
No. Yeah.
not the value of the recurring
Okay.
contracts. Yep,
Wow. Wow. Okay. That's really great advice.
yep.
Really great insight there.
Mhm.
Switching somewhat, you're a Christian who attends church regularly, and you're also a greedy Scrooge who's so full of money you could just take care of the homeless problem in Nashville in one fell swoop.
Mhm.
Where's the friction points, and when were you comfortable and uncomfortable by owning a business as another missionary comes in needing sponsors and the like?
I don't know that it was so much friction because I've addressed this on previous episodes about a spirit of generosity, and I wholeheartedly believe in that. And I tried to be generous in giving to worthy causes.
Yep.
Um, there is a perception sometime if you own a business that you're wealthy, and I dare
Yep.
say the vast majority of small business owners in this country are not wealthy. I was one of those.
Mm-hmm.
But with the perception that you're wealthy, people will say, "Oh, can you sponsor this charity thing? Can you sponsor this or whatever?" And I would do, maybe one a year or something like that. But and I didn't get a ton of those, but on occasion, hey, you own a business, can you sponsor this or can you do this? And I would politely decline on most of those, but I would try to do a few. And
Sure.
so it really wasn't a friction for me. Um
Okay.
and if I really felt and believed in something, I'd give to it, and I would give not from the business, but from my personal
Yeah.
income. So that was not a friction. I think maybe an, another friction, more of a friction for me, were people that in my church family, my church circles, occasionally would want a relative or something. They would pitch them for employment.
Mm,
And
yeah.
and I didn't have a problem hiring people that were in my church, and I did, and I had good experience. But not everybody that sent me a name of their nephew or whatever did I hire because they didn't meet the criteria, even though I might be good friends and we were Christians, but that didn't mean that automatically they were going to get a job at my company because I'm a Christian business owner. There were
Right.
other
Right.
criteria other than, are you a Christian? Do you go to church? In fact, I'd even asked that on an interview. That never came up on my
Okay.
interviews. But I did
That's
want to
right.
know,
That's right.
can you solve a network problem? I did want to know that,
Right.
regardless of what church you went to. So
Yes.
maybe it wasn't a friction for me. It may have been a friction for some people that tried to pitch people to me to hire. I don't know if they're offended or whatever. And I try to be nice about it. I'm like, I'll give anybody an interview, and I did.
Right.
But I
Right.
wouldn't guarantee a hire just because you're my friend or just because we go to the same church.
Right. Good. That's a good answer. Finally, bad business advice from friends, coworkers, colleagues, mentors. Anything jump
Mm,
out? I mean, you've got good advice. You talked about positives of mentors, but even the best coaches are off
yeah.
from time to time.
I think one thing just comes to mind, and I don't know if this is the most representative of bad advice, but is one that it hit me pretty hard. I am a stickler for customer service, and I drilled that into our people. We have got we've got to be responsive to our clients. When they have a need, we need to respond. We need to respond in a timely way, communication. And a lot of tech people are very good technically, but a little bit lacking on communication skills. And when I say lacking, meaning they just don't communicate. I had one guy, he was
Okay.
fantastic. He was smart as everything, but he just didn't answer emails generally, even emails from me. I'm like, hey, can you do such and such? And I'd be expecting an email back. Yeah, I'm on it or whatever. I never hear. And I'd say, hey, I call his name. Did you get my email? He goes, yeah, I'm working on it. What'd you think? I'm like, I thought you ignored me. That's what I thought because you weren't responding.
Of
And I said, if I'm thinking that, think about what a client, like, I'm down right now. Can somebody help me?
course.
And they don't get a response. They don't know that you're working on it. And so I was trying to drill that into our folks. And we were in a period of time where it just seemed like a lot of people were falling down on customer service. And I was very frustrated about it because I was getting complaints from clients. Hey, I'm not hearing back from your guy. What's going on? And and I was complaining about it to a friend who is sort of an informal advisor. He was a business owner in another industry, and and he goes, Philip, you're too nice. And this is the advice he gave me. He goes, they're not even hearing what you're saying because you're too nice. You've got to change your tone. You got to get out of character to get their attention. He goes, you need to yell at them.
Oh no.
So I got so frustrated. I'm like, you know what? This doesn't feel right, but I'm going to do it.
Okay.
And the behavior was egregious and it was ongoing. Just we were being sloppy. We were just being very sloppy in our customer service and responding all across the board. So I called everybody in and I yelled at them. I
All
was
right.
I wasn't really mad. I was irritated, but I feigned being really irate and yelled at
Mm-hmm.
them. And the minute I did it, I regretted it because I saw it in their
Okay.
faces. It shocked them. It did get the message over, but I think I lost a little respect among my employees that day. And I went home and I'm like, I'm never going to do that again. And I guess the bad advice is you got to get out of character to do something. No, I don't think so. You've got to stay in character. Your employees know who you are. And I think what I did that day was so out of character and it was so shrill and it was so harsh. I think it did more damage than good. Got their attention, but I think it, I felt a little kind of a wall come up between me and particularly some of the employees because they took a personal affront that I was being harsh at them. And I really, really regret it. I never did that again. I regretted doing it that time. I think that was bad advice to go
Okay.
do something that was totally antithetical to the way I normally act in front of my employees.
Okay.
A little confessional.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. definitely. Well, I didn't get all the questions I wanted to get out, but we're out of time.
All right.
Let's do this again.
Yeah,
And
sure.
listeners, if you have a question for a founder and want to get it answered, send it in. And we'll be happy to include that at the next interview with the founder.
Sounds good. See you next time, Kent.
Thanks for your time, Philip.